All right.
And it looks like we're in round 4. Magic the Gathering Players Championship 2012 from Seattle, Washington. Samuele Estratti on the left, John Finkel on the right. And we already have turn 1 action with Finkel, Celestial Colonnade, of course, coming into play tap. Serum Visions for Estratti.
Right, turn 1 action being a tapped land and a card drawing spell. But that's what these games are going to be all about, are those incremental advantages. Estratti going to want to deploy a threat to the board and then protect it with cards like the Spell Pierce he's holding right now. Finkel, much more sort of mid-range aggressive deck. He's got 4 Restoration Angels, a little bit higher of a curve, and cards like Remand that are designed to just slow the game down a little bit until he can stick a big threat.
Second island from Estratti.
Awkwardly holding a Tarmogoyf. Can't cast it, may not want to cast it. Killer's deck has 4 spell snares. Or, sorry, Finkel's deck has 4 spell snares, so running 2-mana cards into those is very dangerous. Estratti definitely able to capitalize on the Vedalken Shackles if the game goes long. On the other hand, Finkel right now wanting to take advantage of his superior mana base and his larger threats to just, you know, cast spells at instant speed and play through Estratti's counter spells.
You see him put the Hallowed Fountain in off of the fetch land. Oh, looks like there's...
And Iganjo Castle, a card that Finkel told me earlier. He said he didn't know that card existed until he was getting his face smashed in with that in concert with Geist of St. Traft. All right, so Finkel drawing a Vendilion Click this turn, and it probably going to just play a landed pass. You know, it's amazing how little it looks like is taking place in these games, but in reality, each player is just trying to play around everything they possibly can at the same time.
It's a Tectonic Edge for John Finkel, I believe.
Yes, that is. Looking kind of awkward against a board of 2 islands.
Well, there's the Stomping Ground that Estratti's going to put into play untapped. Of course, it's going to cost him 2 life.
Right, and he's playing that untapped to represent his own Vendilion Click. John casting his click.
Here in Modern, especially in Modern matches with blue, we're going to see a lot of back and forthing in the games, waiting for your opponent to do something, then spring on that opportunity to do something of your own.
Now, normally you'd be pretty excited to have a 3-1 flyer in play to your opponent's empty board, but both Burst Lightning and Lightning Bolt from Estratti show that he can sort of take it out whenever he wants to, and is probably going to do that after Finkel chooses his card.
We see the Tarmogoyf there, 2 clicks of his own. Of course, 2 clicks is awkward.
Yeah.
And, of course, the Vedalken Shackles.
Right. Vendilion Click is legendary, despite seeming like one of the least legendary cards you may have ever played with. So it's kind of awkward when both sides have one, or when you draw 2. A lot of the time you're going to click yourself just to get rid of your own click, or your own redundant click, I should say.
And we see Finkel take the Shackles. And Estratti's got click of his own. Of course, it's going to legend rule them both the way, and he's still going to get enters the battlefield trigger. See another Hallowed Fountain, Celestial Colonnade, Restoration Angel, Remand, and another Tech Edge from John Finkel.
Right, he's probably going to be taking Restoration Angel here. You know, I thought Estratti was going to just bolt the other click, but being able to cast your own click gets rid of it and takes whatever Finkel's biggest threat is, which is super important given that Finkel knows what your hand is, knows that you don't have a way to counter a creature, and is tapped out.
Does Estratti's having a second click of his own there have a significant impact on that play?
I think it's important in that it makes you more comfortable doing it, but the thing is you could kill his click anyway. I think you want to cast your own click because Finkel knows that you don't have a counter spell for whatever his biggest threat is.
Okay, we see John playing that second Tectonic Edge.
Thus making Estratti's 4th land potentially awkward because it's his only green source for Tarmogoyf. Now we see him draw a forest, so it looks like he's not going to have to worry about that.
But he knowing John's hand and knowing he doesn't have the Spell Pierce.
Yeah, right. Or the Spell Snare.
Spell Snare means he's going to run that Tarmogoyf out there, which he does.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want to do. Tarmogoyf, there is a creature, a sorcery, and a land in the graveyard, so it's going to come out as a 3/4. Oh, but he drew the Spell Snare right on time.
Well, that's John Finkel for you, ladies and gentlemen.
Magic is a skill game.
Yep.
No, I mean, you know, you do play 4 in the deck. He has drawn 2 cards, so
There's a mountain from Estratti. He's playing around those tectonic edges.
Well, yeah, and I think he actually he plays the mountain almost to ask Finkel to tech edge his stomping grounds because he knows he has the forest in play. Nothing really profitable for Finkel if he does that. Now he's got Restoration Angel. Again, Finkel's deck with 4 Restoration Angels too, so...
He's drawn a second one, as a matter of fact.
Not too shabby. So his hand is 2 Restoration Angels, a Hallowed Fountain, and a Remand.
Good.
He has some measure of tempo advantage, I'd say.
He has some measure of getting really lucky after getting Vendilion clicked. That is for sure. We're seeing the Rug Delver deck not very frequently having 5 lands on the battlefield, but just not a whole lot happening this game. Now, we see Estratti with another Vendilion click, the one we saw earlier, and he's actually drawn his 3rd copy, so he's going to look to strip one of those Restoration Angels away.
So did you have anything to do with Vendilion Click not having a cool name as a legendary creature?
I was not there at that point, so I absolved myself of responsibility.
Because legendary guys should have "of the" in their name.
They should have a comma somewhere.
Right.
Very important. This is just such a crazy game to watch. Like, you're seeing is that a main phase Restoration Angel, or is that after Estratti passes? Like, the timing of these spells is so counterintuitive when basically every card in the deck can be played at instant speed.
No, we're not going to see this all the time in Modern. There is a click. Estratti targeted himself.
Yeah, Spell Pierce out of there, not really doing a whole lot of work. I think if Estratti knew that John had another Restoration Angel, he might have targeted differently. But as it is, cycling in a 3-1 is pretty good. John doing that at the end of Estratti's turn.
All right, John knows that Samuele has that Lightning Bolt in his hand. So an attack is going to come. Estratti doesn't know that John has the second Angel. Of course, the second Angel can't save the first Angel.
That is true. Right, the non-Angel clause to prevent those from going infinite also prevents you from getting extra value out of your Restoration Angels. Now, I'm a little confused as to why Estratti didn't just burst lightning the Restoration Angel with Kicker when John was tapped out. Having a 3-1 on the board against your opponent's 3-4 is not exactly where you want to be unless he's going to block and use a shock to make his extra click redundant. But then, yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't just burst lining it. I mean, you're on the offensive. You have some points to burn, but John's at 19 life, so you're probably not going to the dome with those burn spells.
Good.
All right, Estratti untaps.
Estratti does untap. He has yet another land. He's got his Vendilion click, but it's going to run right into another Angel, forcing him to tap out for the Burst Lightning. Unless Finkel decides not to bite and simply takes the 3 points of damage.
Yeah, that was a fetch land that he drew off of the click. There's that second Restoration Angel from Finkel, and
2 cards.
Suddenly the skies are looking kind of heavenly here on John Finkel's side.
Exactly, and unlike last turn when he could cast the Burst Lightning with Kicker to eliminate the Angel scot-free, right now if he tries to do that, he's going to run right into Finkel's Remand, which he has exactly the correct amount of mana for. So I'm a little bit confused by Estratti's line of play. I mean, he can't obviously anticipate the Restoration Angel. That's all the other reason to just kill the first one while he can.
Okay, there's the Lightning Bolt as predicted. Now John going to think over that Remand or not. And yeah, I don't see any. Oh, he's just going to let it go.
Yeah, no reason to really Remand a 1-mana spell when you can Remand the click or just anything else that Estratti casts. Plus, you're in the driver's seat with the 3/4 flyer.
There's a Delver of Secrets and Misty Rainforest.
Now, John very close to being able to start activating that Celestial Colonnade, and that's going to kill Estratti in 2 attacks if he activates the Misty Rainforest. So Finkel might just want to start tapping out and attacking at this point. The Rug Delver deck doesn't have access to one of the defining cards in the format, and that's Path to Exile. So you can really run your flyers out there without having to worry about too many bad things happening to it.
Yeah, one of the criticisms of the Rug Delver deck is it generally doesn't have much comeback capability. Right. Once you get behind, I mean, it builds all these incremental advantages, but if you get behind from one big thing, you're in a lot of trouble.
It's interesting there. John tapped his sack land. Estratti chose not to use that turn to cast Vendilion Click. Oh, no, sorry. That's what he's doing now before John untaps. He's going to click it. But he is going to fall to 14 life doing that, allowing Finkel to just tap out for the Colonnade if he wants to.
Okay, there's the click.
You?
He's going to target John.
Go.
Right, letting him keep those cards from man at this stage in the game. It basically just has cycling.
Yeah.
Estratti sees no reason to just let Finkel cycle the card for him.
Into something better, sure.
Right.
All right, John untaps and draws a Mana Leak.
Definitely could have used the Mana Leak when Estratti cast Vendilion Click. On the other hand, I think he's just going to play his land and activate Colonnade right now. I mean, he's got a lot of counter magic, but there's not many things that go wrong for him.
Okay, he's going to put that Hallowed Fountain into play, untap, deal 2 damage to himself, and he's going to attack.
Sure.
Samuele's going to say, hang on, back up.
It's funny, the Vigilance ability of Celestial Colonnade allows him to keep 2 mana up for both Remand and Mana Leak.
That's why that card was thoroughly annoying when it was in Standard.
This really does look like a Standard deck from a couple years ago. I mean, you see the Tectonic Edges, you see the Colonnades, you see the Mana Leaks.
So what is Samuele thinking about here? I mean, does he...
I'm not really sure. He doesn't really have any good targets for Lightning Bolt right now, unless he is thinking about doming.
He doesn't have Lightning Bolt in his hand anymore. He used it to kill off the other Angel.
Okay.
Sorry, Burst Lightning.
Burst Lightning.
7.
Some red lightning-themed 1-mana damage spell.
All right, so he takes 7.
Like, part of me wonders if John deliberately tapped low on counter magic to make Estratti sack his sack land to make him represent a lethal attack next turn. Like, that's super next level. But I mean, John is that good.
So we see Estratti transform the Delver of Secrets into the Insectile Aberration. That means he can certainly double block anything that John throws at him.
So Estratti can answer the Colonnade sort of with a Burst Lightning, but not through Finkel's counter spells. He can double block the Angel, but if Finkel just keeps activating Colonnade, Estratti's not in good shape.
It's like he's going in with the Insectile Aberration anyway. Drop John to 13. And as Estratti passes the turn, we hear that Alexander Hayne has won game 1 from Shadow Yasuoka on one of the back tables. So
Estratti can effectively just tap Finkel's Colonnade by Burst Lightning it. Finkel at 13, that would allow him to attack for 6 and have 4 more points of damage with his remaining Burst Lightning, putting Finkel within Lightning Bolt range. And he does have exactly the amount of mana to do that if he drew a Lightning Bolt. So Finkel does have to think about whether he wants to tap out this turn, but that is exactly going to be what he does. With the extra land now, he doesn't have to tap Colonnade in order to pay for a counter spell, which is huge right now in terms of tempo.
Kicker.
Estratti Burst Lightning with Kicker targeting the Restoration Angel. Finkel has to decide whether he wants to Mana Leak or Remand it.
Right. I mean, doesn't he Mana Leak now, save the remand for the tempo advantage next turn?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah, you're probably right that you want to Mana Leak it right now. At 13 life, you probably don't want your opponent having burn spells, and that's exactly what he does. He Mana Leaks it. He knows he's going to have to answer it at some point.
Well, and he knows Estratti is going to have to go into an unfavorable block. He's going to have to go into a chump block to stay alive.
Right, that's exactly what he's going to have to do. He's probably going to use the click and the remaining Burst Lightning to take out Angel, and just isn't putting together any satisfying answers to John's Colonnade. All right, I guess he's going to block the Colonnade and bolt it, not the Angel. But
yeah, that
way,
seems to be the play.
You know.
But John has a second Colonnade, so that will be able to come across next turn.
Oh, so then you probably do block the Angel. so to make John at least tap 5 every turn for the colonnade. All the blue-white lands kind of blend together, you know what I'm saying?
3.
The colonnade and the hollowed fountain do look a lot like each other. Here we go.
And he does get rid of the colonnade, I guess, just to save himself some extra life points. But,
All right, Estratti drops down to 4. Finkel's at 13. 1 card in hand for both players.
The game looking pretty bad for Estratti. Rug Delver not known for its comeback potential, and especially against a deck designed to capitalize on a late game like John's is.
Is that a Sword of Worn piece?
It is, and I think John doesn't want to show him that card
right
now. I mean, you know, why? No reason to reveal more information if you can just attack for 7 and make him show you what you got. Yep, and he just chump blocks the colonnade, falls to 1.
Yeah, again, there's not really that haymaker from the top rope for the Rug Delver deck, and Estratti does scoop up his hand. So John Finkel goes up 1-0. What kind of sideboard action do you think we're going to see here from these two guys?
From John, it's hard for me to say. I think you want the extra Vendilion click to threaten at instant speed. I know he was talking to me about Threads of Disloyalty against Tarmogoyf, but on the other hand, that's a fairly unreliable plan. I think Kitchen Finks is excellent in this matchup, so we're going to see some combination of those. On the other hand, from Estratti's side, Blood Moon is absolutely huge.
Well, it's going to shut off nearly everything that John had in play right there. It shuts off the Tech Edge. It shuts off the Hallowed Fountain. Well, it turns into red, but in mountains. It definitely shuts off the Colonnade. I mean, that's a huge turn for John Finkel.
Right. John actually has even more non-basic lands than that. Blood Moon, the most important part.
You know, you can play Friday Night Magic at a store near you every Friday. Earn Planeswalker points and battle against your friends in Friday Night Magic. September's FNM promo card is Lingering Souls. Visit www.wizards.com/FNM to find a store near you. You're still not eligible to play yet.
Very unfortunately. Now, Finkel could try and bring in negates against Blood Moon. His spell snares are kind of awkward. They're good against Snapcaster Mage and Tarmogoyf, but not really very much else. On the other hand, negate, not very good against Vendilion clicks and the threats coming out of the Rug Delver deck. So the sideboarding situation is actually kind of awkward for John.
Remember that both players have access to each other's deck lists here in the Players Championship. So there's this game within the game of sideboard. Okay, if I know he's going to try to sideboard in the Annul or the Blood Moon or whatever, then I'm going to. That means then Finkel goes back to how much of that sort of meta game do you think is going to happen in this, or are they just going to go with their solid picks against the other deck?
Oh, I think it's tremendous. I mean, exactly like we were talking about with negate from Finkel's side. If you don't have to worry about Blood Moon, card's bad. It hits Cryptic Command, Shackles, but only sort of. I guess it's not bad, but it's certainly not reliable. You know, whereas if you know Blood Moon just defeats you, not only are you more likely to have a card like that, you're also going to lean a little bit more on cards like Disenchant, potentially Annul. It's a really hard card. It's just a really intricate dance. I mean, there's so many. The upsides are high, the downsides are high. You kind of just have to take a guess at some point and get a read on your opponent. You know.
Fair. So we see both competitors. Samuele Estratti on the left. As we pull back, there's John Finkel. See the back table matches. Again, we have one game result so far. Alexander Hayne up a game against Shadow Soka.
Now, talking about the interplay of players being able to see each other's deck list, it's interesting. I was talking with John and Brian, and they were saying that actually affected the composition of their deck for this event. They really wanted to play with 4 mana leaks due to playtesting by their friend Godinas Vidigiris, another prominent Magic player in his own right. But they said because their opponents would know what their decks were, they didn't want them knowing that they could just hold up 3 mana all the time or just cast their spell again. So they wanted to mix up the blend of mana leaks and remands so that there was no rock-solid way to play around it each turn.
So that they didn't know, oh, he's just citing in these 3 mana leaks. I got to know, I got to figure out whether he's going to do 2 mana leaks and 1 remand, or 2 remands and a mana leak.
Yeah, right, precisely. And that's something that you see in the Players' Championship that's really unique to this event, not most other tournaments.
Okay, we are going to get to the action here momentarily. It looks like the players are finally shuffling up. John has made his last selection.
Right, and that was the negate that we were talking about. Could be either very powerful or very weak, depending on what happens.
Well, you like your counter spells to have flexibility, and negate is, especially against a deck whose major threats are creatures, negate is suboptimal.
Right, I mean, you're right. You just absolutely do not want to be holding negate when your opponent casts Vendilion Clack.
But you really want to be holding it when he casts Blood Moon.
That's exactly right. Now, it looks like he did keep in at least one of the spell snares for cards like Tarmogoyf. I mean, it gets mana leak. It's important to be able to force through your spells. Snapcaster Mage, obviously one of the most powerful cards from the Rug Delver deck. But, I mean, you really are having to plug your narrow but powerful answer into their powerful but narrowly answered threat. It's a feature that's kind of unique to the modern format. So
tell the folks at home how John Finkel being on the draw as opposed to on the play here might affect his sideboard choices, or how Estratti's choices might be affected by being on the play.
That's a good distinction. Obviously, cards like Spell Snare become way more important when you're on the draw because it's really pretty hard to beat a Tarmogoyf. All you can do about it really is cast Path to Exile, and Estratti's going to be trying to fight that. On the other hand, negate, like we were just talking about, and Mana Leak and Remand specifically, they still hit Blood Moon on the draw because Estratti doesn't have any cards like Noble Hierarch, Bird of Paradise that can power it out. From Estratti's side, I feel like Finkel's deck is slow enough that there's not really that much that changes. You're pretty much on plan the entire time. You know you're going to have the time to do what you need to do. You're still going to want to do the same things. I mean, you want to get a turn 1 Delver. You want to put pressure on your opponent as quickly as possible. I think from Estratti's end, being on the player of the draw doesn't matter that much. I think on Finkel's, it might tempt you to bring in cards like a Null. But in general, I don't actually think it's that important.
Estratti has to land a turn 1 Delver or turn 2 Tarmogoyf to really lay the pressure on John and kind of be in this game, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And Delver specifically, John doesn't have the lightning bolts and burst lightnings that everyone else has, so there really aren't any good answers to Delver besides just blocking it with a Restoration Angel, which is obviously a difficult situation to engineer.
Well, you can flash it in pretty easy.
You certainly can flash it in, but you got to tap 4 mana to do that, and your opponent has Mana Leak and Cryptic Command.
All right, there we see John finishing up, shuffling up. Turns out that in one of the back matches, there's a delay because the competitors didn't get their opponent's deck lists in time. So I believe
glitch.
I believe that our judge on the stage, Scott Marshall, is looks like nobody has the deck list for the first round.
Okay, so they just aren't aware of each other's deck lists right now.
Right, so thankfully we had sideline reporter Rashad Miller to correct us on that. The competitors don't have each other's deck lists for round 4. They will get them, I understand, at the end of this round.
Interesting. Oh, and that makes sense. In a tournament like this, where like everyone's in reasonably close proximity, you could scout very easily after everyone sat down to play. So I can understand why that.
Both players keep, and Estratti leads off with the Phyrexian Delver like he needs to.
Yeah, right. No, Delver of Secrets is exactly what you want every single game if you're Estratti, and Finkel simply plays a land and passes.
Did I call that Phyrexian Delver?
You did call it Phyrexian Delver? That's a very different card.
It's Delver of Secrets, for those of you watching at home. And it does not transform. Gets in for 1. We see that John does have a Path to Exile in his hand.
Right. It's just a very risky card to cast. Now it looks like Estratti going for the Tarmogoyf. Finkel actually probably happy about that, given that he's holding Threads of Disloyalty. Which can also hit Delver, although that's slightly less exciting. John's deck, not nearly as many instants or sorceries as Estratti's, but if Estratti flips it first, Threads becomes a lot more relevant.
We see John fetching for the Hallowed Fountain. Not to be confused with the Celestial Colonnade.
Not that I would ever make that
Yeah,
error.
right.
And
Looks like he drew Geist of Saint Traft, and he is going to
Good.
play. Is that a Mutavault?
that is a Mutavault. And one of the awkward aspects of John's mana base, he's got Hallowed Fountain, Mutavault, he's got
Draw.
Tectonic Edge in his hand, making casting Threads of Disloyalty next turn very
Attack.
difficult. And he could get a Geist of Saint Traft, but that's not going to really play very good defense.
So we get into the red zone with the Insectile Aberration. That's a 3-2. The Tarmogoyf that is currently a 1-2. And that Delver got transformed into the Insectile Aberration when Estratti revealed Cryptic Command.
It's got to be tempting to try and block with Mutavault here. You just know that's not going to work, but it's got to at least enter your mind at some point.
There we see Path to Exile on the Aberration.
Right, and it's not, you certainly don't want to be casting Path to Exile this early, but sometimes you have to. I mean, 3 damage a turn is a lot of damage, and the Rug Delver deck does not capitalize on Path to Exile lands the way that some other decks like John or John's deck are able to. There's just not as many expensive spells
Tick
in
two.
the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only real advantage you're giving them is thinning the deck that small percentage.
Right. I mean, the hand that Estratti happens to have contains Cryptic Command Vedalken Shackles, so it's able to take care of the path incidentally, but there's only 2 Cryptic Commands in the deck, only 3 Shackles, so most of the time pathing a threat on turn 2 is more effective against Rug Delver than it would be against other
John's
decks.
going to definitely cast that Geist of Saint Traft. And we'll see what Estratti has for him.
He can't cast the Deprive that's in his hand. He can't bolt it. He can't Shackles it. So I think the Geist is basically just gonna resolve.
And then go to work.
Yeah. Now something Estratti can do is play a Vedalken Shackles, and once he gets to 4 islands, just take the Angel every turn, which is you know, an indirect way of dealing with a 2/2 hexproof. You can probably block a 2/2 or afford to take 2 damage.
All right, that Tarmogoyf is now 2-3, so John is not going to block it with the Geist of Saint Traft. And Estratti drops Vedalken Shackles and a Misty Rainforest.
And Estratti's got to be thrilled that Vedalken Shackles resolved there. I mean, that or Blood Moon would be just devastating right now, but a huge sort of Warren piece for John that he can now resolve. I mean, you've got 2 reactive control decks with a ton of counter spells now tapping out for haymakers every turn. Not really what we're used to seeing. 2 very awkward Threads of Disloyalty in John's hand that he cannot cast.
Here comes the Geist into the red zone. Estratti is going to take 6.
Estratti right now going to be in pretty good shape if he untaps, but he really, really wants a 4th island.
He certainly can't. He certainly can't get that. Let that sort of Warren piece stay there for long.
No, not at all.
Okay, Estratti at 12, Finkel at 14. As Estratti untaps and draws, I didn't quite catch what he drew there.
I did not quite catch that either. I know he has a Cryptic Command in his hand. He's got Bolt Spell. Oh, he drew Mana Leak this turn. He's got a ton of counterspell. That Cryptic's going to be devastating if Finkel's in on the Equip the Sword plan. And Estratti just getting in with Tarmogoyf over and over again. Tarmogoyf not as large as it could be.
And not as large as it generally is. I mean, it doesn't you know, with all the deck searching and things that the Rug Delver deck tends to do, it's got its own stuff in the graveyard. Estratti has no graveyard right now.
Yeah.
Or has no cards in his graveyard.
Right, he can put the land in the graveyard, but Finkel has an Arid Mesa, so that's not going to accomplish much. Finkel does get his 2nd blue source right now if he wants to cast Threads, but he doesn't really have a way to protect it. So equipping the sword now, kind of daring Estratti to cast Cryptic Command or do something about it so that he can retaliate with a pretty devastating Threads. Now, I mean, he can obviously Shackles back his Tarmogoyf to get it back, but, I mean, if your Threads of Disloyalty are in essence disenchanting your opponent's Vedalken Shackles, you can't be too sad about that.
So Estratti is going to choose to... And it wasn't clear what the two modes on Cryptic Command are. We're going to assume one of them is.
Right, one of them is tap your creatures. So tap your creatures and draw a card. I think you want to cast Threads of Disloyalty right now, if nothing else, just to avoid a hit from the Tarmogoyf. And like tying up 2 of Estratti's 4 lands, very powerful right now. Estratti's hand, very awkward. It contains 3 counter spells, but he kind of has to tap out every turn. Finkel can more or less play at his leisure. He's still got a Geist. He's got a Restoration Angel in play, and he does, in fact, Threads of Disloyalty of the Tarmogoyf like we talked about.
Yeah, Estratti probably needs to draw land in order to have a lot of action here, and it is a Delver.
Yeah, and people talk about Delver of Secrets all the time, but I mean, it's just highlights. Like sometimes Delver of Secrets is just a fugitive wizard.
Right.
You know, it's just embarrassing right now. You know, it's not going to play any defense. I mean, you're going to have to put him on the board so that when you shackles back your Tarmogoyf, you can do something. And you know, if he's got an instant on top of his deck right now, he's going to be in good shape. But I mean, he also is going to be hit very hard by that Geist of Saint Traft. Still doesn't have the 4th land to take away the Angel either. So.
And his own Tarmogoyf.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I have a feeling one of those Delvers is going to chump block.
All right, we see John with the, well, he's about to play that Tectonic Edge.
Now, the interaction with Threads of Disloyalty and Restoration Angel, is it such that Restoration Angel makes it come back into play under your control?
Yes.
Wow! Well, that's very interesting. Bet Finkel's not too upset that he got to untap.
He is not too upset that he got to untap. Yeah, because, yeah, if he Restoration Angels the Tarmogoyf now, it's his.
Forever.
Well, until Estratti takes it back with the
most
shackles.
relevantly, it's his for this turn.
Right.
When the Tarmogoyf is not going to be doing any blocking of the Geist of Saint Traft with Sword of War and Peace equipped to it.
Okay, so there's the activation of the shackles. John is effectively going to counter the activation of the shackles by flashing in Restoration Angel.
Making Tarmogoyf bigger in the process and more resilient to the Vedalken shackles if something else goes to the yard.
And then the Geist and the Angel token are going to get in. Estratti is going to block. Is there any value to... No, there's not any value to that, since the Sword of War and Peace is there.
Yeah, right. Sword would kill you now. A creature's in the graveyard, meaning that the Tarmogoyf is not going to be able to be shackles without another island on the board.
We hear from one of the other tables. Yasuoka has tied it up against Alexander Hayden. They are 1-1 and going to game 3. Pretty rough-looking situation here for the Pro Tour Philadelphia champion. Was the winner of the first Modern professional.
That is true. I mean, Estratti has a lot of experience with Modern, but I mean, neither of these games have really been close. And that highlights to me a weakness of the Rug Delver deck to me, which is when it falls behind, it doesn't have very good comeback mechanisms. I mean, it's leaning upon its Vedalken shackles, but people are going to build their decks around that. You know, and you're a 3-color deck playing a card that's dependent upon your islands. It's not just going to be able to gain control of anything.
So I believe in the beginning of the combat step, Estratti has activated Vedalken shackles so that he can take the Angel. At least it would be a blocker.
Right. Now Finkel can do a number of things. He can path to exile it. He can just say okay and attack with Geist of Saint Traft.
John Finkel doing a little math right now. Because remember, the Angel can't block the Geist of Saint Traft.
Right, because of its protection from white. So Geist probably going to abyss away the Insectile Aberration. John, letting the Angel be taken, you know.
He's going to attack.
Oh, and he pass exile the only creature that can block the
and that's going to kill him because of the cards in his hand.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And that's the match. John Finkel takes down Samuele Estratti 2-1 in round 4 of the Magic Players Championship. First round of Modern. That match turn out basically the way you thought it was going to turn out?
I think so. I mean, talking to John and Brian, they said their deck is designed to be very powerful against Rug Delver. It was exactly what their plan was. Their cards are well positioned. You know, you want 3/4 flyers against 3/2 and 3/1 flyers. So I think the deck did what it was supposed to do, Sheldon.
There we are back in the booth. I'm Sheldon Menery. He's Zach Hill. We are covering round 4 of the Magic Players Championship. We've just seen John Finkel take down Samuele Estratti 2-0. It's modern Magic. It's kind of savage quietly. It's not savage like that red green, but they're calmly with blue and white kind of getting there.
Are you choosing your guild now, Sheldon?
Right.
It's not gruel. No, it's interesting. I mean, we see a format like Cube Draft where all the cards are very powerful, but you're kind of just casting haymakers over and over again, and it's really, really exciting. Modern, a lot of the power sort of cancels each other out, and where you're really trying to maneuver yourself into a position to do something powerful and not walk into your opponent's blowout more than just sort of casting, you know, shotgun blast after shotgun blast.
I think we talked earlier at the top of this round's broadcast about incremental advantage that happens in these decks, and you build these slow advantages, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you move forward and get there and get there and get there.
Exactly.
And then you finally, because you know in the beginning of that game that didn't really look like sort of Finkel blowout, but the way it ended, it sure was.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, Estratti did what he wanted to do. He led with Delver. You know, Finkel stumbled on mana a little bit, but I mean, he just has the answers, right? Like Threads of Disloyalty, very well positioned against Tarmogoyf and Delver of Secrets. Estratti, if he doesn't end the game in the first 4 turns, is going to be looking in pretty bad shape.
And it turns out that he was. All right, we are going to go over to Studio B and Marshall Sutcliffe for a feature, Modern Magic, Round 4, Magic Players Championship. Zach Hill, Sheldon Menery, we will be back for Round 5.